You're probably here because you're wondering, how do I not fail this $2,000 exam that is going to affect my career? First of all, the PRITE does not prepare you for your psychiatry boards. The PRITE is a bunch of random facts, either you know it or you don't. There are some random questions on the boards that you will never be able to guess, but there's more clinical judgment, more ambiguity. It's more treatment focused. So how should you study for your psychiatry boards? At this point in your career, you know that you should be doing lots and lots of questions. We all know that's the best way to study for these standardized exams. But there's multiple Q banks out there. What Q bank should you choose? They're extremely expensive. And then what do you use for content review for your weaker areas? One of the most used resources is Beat the Boards. So Beat the Boards is very popular among psychiatry residents, but it's also very expensive. So if your program did not pay for this, you're going to pay a lot of money to use their Q bank. Their Q bank is very large, comprehensive, but some people say that the questions are too easy compared to the actual boards exam. That being said, lots of people use this as their main resource and do really well on the exam. They do have videos for all topics, which is useful when you're weak in a topic. However, the videos are very long, so if you're like me and you have short attention span, it might be too long for you. Other people, it's great for them when they're driving in their car and they can just listen. Another resource you can use is a Spiegel and Kenny question bank book. So this one is also very popular among psychiatry residents, and it's a lot cheaper than buying a Q bank like Beat the Boards. People continually say it is the most representative of the exam questions. A major con is the limited number of questions in that Q bank book, so you might want to use another resource as well. There is an online version which you can use to help sort the questions by topic if you're weak in a particular topic. Another Q bank you can use is Board Vitals. So I have not used this since I was a medical student. I remember the questions being helpful for learning the topic, but not so much for them representing the actual exam. And that's what I've heard about it for studying for the psychiatry boards. That yes, these questions are useful, but some topics are overrepresented and the questions aren't that much like the actual exam. Rush Review is another Q bank that you can use. It's not as expensive as Beat the Boards, which is why some psychiatry residencies choose this over Beat the Boards. The questions are, again, not as representative of the actual exam, but they can be very useful for the clinical knowledge that comes behind these questions. A newer Q bank is Now You Know Med or Now You Know Psych for the psych boards. It's a lot cheaper than Beat the Boards, and it's a pretty good Q bank. And the flashcards content review are there as well, so if you need to go back and review topics that you're weak on, they have that you can fall back on. So I often get asked, do I still need to study neurology, neuroscience for the psychiatry boards like we did for the PRITE? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes, but it's not like the PRITE. The PRITE was basically a neuro exam. The boards, on the other hand, focuses much more on psychiatry, and the neurology that's going to be the highest yield is going to be that which overlaps with psychiatry. So you really got to know your dementias. I also recommend knowing TBIs, any type of head injury, stroke, neuroscience as it pertains to how medications act on what receptors and how drugs act on what receptors, and that is going to be your highest return on investment. So let's say that you're cramming right now and you want to know what topics should you really focus on. So I would say the number one tier with the highest return on investment would be psychopharmacology. It is incredibly high yield. They are very treatment focused. Know your mood disorders and your psychotic disorders because those are the bread and butter of psychiatry. And then substance use, they still do ask a lot of questions about substance use, know everything about the substances. For Tier 2 psychiatry topics, I recommend reviewing child psychiatry, especially those Erickson stages. Review emergency psychiatry. They do like to incorporate emergency psych in the clinical vignettes. And review that neurology, especially that overlaps with psychiatry, like I said earlier. Also, if you're weak in sleep, make sure that you review sleep disorders and sleep stages. Then I would say for Tier 3, things that you want to review but are not quite as high yield, psychotherapy and defense mechanisms. Yes, these are going to show up on your exam. You don't want to miss easy questions. People tend to be shocked by how many psychotherapy questions there are. You got to know those weird ethics questions and then symptoms and consultation. So how can you use this channel to actually study for boards? I recommend starting with the board question reviews. Don't just passively watch, pause, answer the questions, and use them to identify your weak areas. After that, move on to the high-yield psychopharmacology series, since psychopharm is one of the highest yield topics on the exam. You probably don't need to review every psychiatry topic because you're already a graduated psychiatrist and know most of the core material. Instead, use the Psych Cram series to selectively target weak areas. If substance use is a weakness, I highly recommend the substance use series because it is consistently high yield and heavily represented. If neurology is a weak area, I created the high yield neurology series to focus on neurotopics with the highest yield for psychiatry boards. The Surviving Psychiatry Residency series is designed to help with management style questions, next best step decisions, outpatient and psychiatric emergency scenarios, which is often how the ABPN likes to test through clinical vignettes. Starting in August, I will also be posting connected question sets to help simulate the sequential clinical question decision-making style that shows up on boards. Hopefully this helps you study more efficiently. Good luck on your exam, and I'll see you in the next question review.